Awesome. We are live. We are streaming, hopefully, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Twitch. We've got them all going tonight.
Me
Um,
too.
how are you, my dear co host?
I am good. I am really excited about tonight. I know I've heard you speak many times on this subject, but I never get tired of it because I always pick up a, another nugget or another, aha moment goes on. And I just love the fact that I get to hear it over and over again because, reinforcement, right?
Yep,
So,
consistency builds it.
did you notice I'm wearing my blue blocker glasses?
I did. You're learning, girlfriend. Awesome. Alrighty. So I see we're live. We have viewers. I am going to add add to the stage or add to the screen the presentation for tonight. So we're doing it a little bit different tonight. Going to give everyone a sneak peek, if you will, as far as the Circadian Masterclass that's coming up here in a few short weeks, actually. The Circadian Masterclass will be more in depth. This is just a quick overview, quick for me, that is. In regards of what will be presented, or part of what will be presented, and I do go more in depth in that masterclass. It's about a 2 hour, little over, masterclass happening November 11th at 10 a.m. That is a Saturday, so we don't have to worry about people working and interfering with work and all that fun stuff. But let me switch screens here and I will get the ball rolling tonight. So many of you have probably heard me speak. You've probably heard my story. For those of you that are new followers, I know we've picked some up. I'm just going to explain who I am. So I am Becky Niles. I am on Instagram as I am Becky Niles. Pretty simple, right? But I am ultimately a coach, instructor, educator who's passionate about helping people find their health and healing through a healthy, natural lifestyle. I work with clients to heal their body, their mind, their soul from the inside out to live a life of power, presence, purpose. I have been successful in taking and reversing my own conditions. I was dealing with prediabetes, digestive issues, hormonal issues. I had a hysterectomy at 29, thyroid, autoimmune conditions, cardiac issues, even some asthma issues. Emotional health was tanking, and again, weight gain. Ultimately, I did end up well over 200 pounds. And through these 6 intuitive steps, which we now bring into our BNC community and focus in on meetings with our clients, I have ultimately reversed my health and become very passionate about sharing this with others. It Circadian and light routine is definitely a part of that, but also the managing of stress, breath work, grounding, nutrition is a piece of the puzzle, but not the ultimate puzzle. And then also sleep, not the quantity, but the quality that we are pursuing. My qualifications come as the BNC founder and coach. I am also a instructor and educator in quantum biology. Got certified through the Quantum Biology Collective. I am a coach and client specialist for the Keto Camp Academy, Rivero coach and host, and I have been an essential oil director for about 9 years now. So enough about me. One of my favorite everyday, every morning non-negotiables is a simple practice that anyone can do anytime. Actually, it doesn't just have to be in the morning, but it can be done anytime, anywhere outside that you can get your feet connected with the Earth's magnetic field. And that simply just being outside, standing in a park, standing, virtually on almost any surface, and we'll get into that, but really taking connection with the sensations around you, the sun beating on the skin, the wind that is flowing, the air, doing even some breath work while you're out there, but the Earth's surface has this limitless supply of mobile electrons that the ground that we end up when we walk on, or the lakes and the oceans that we swim in, have this negative electrical charge. And when our body ends up and touches that ground, it dissipates all of that static electricity, or the extraneous environmental electrical charges that are on us. At that same time, we receive this charge of energy from in the form of these free electrons, and our body synchronizes with a natural frequency to the earth. Our ancestors were grounded 24/7. So if we look back in history, the ancestors were doing this all the time, right? They slept on the ground, they slept in caves, they slept grounded even. And that'll come in later as far as sleeping grounded and its benefits. Like I said, it is one of the intuitive steps. So the quality, not only the quantity. But that being said, ultimately, if you can end up and get outside for at least 30 minutes minimum in a day, that is what I typically recommend. Now, it is a cumulative effect. So maybe that's 5 minutes at sunrise. Maybe that's 5 minutes going out to get the mail. The different surfaces that can end up and ground you are the grass, the sand, the dirt, the soil, living plants, trees, etc., gravel, rock, any of these natural surfaces swimming in these bodies of water are also grounding. So I realize not everyone, maybe starting out is as you see in these two pictures, me standing in the snow. I do it year round. I also end up and get seasonal benefit of getting cold exposure in there. So you see me in sleeveless, you see me in a tank top, all 4 seasons, right? Spring, summer, fall, winter. I am outside. I am getting that benefit of grounding, but also getting skin in the game. So the other aspect is the frequency. Like I said, magnetic field has this frequency, but taking it a little bit further, this frequency that we end up when we hear has the ability to change the structured water within us, which is also called fourth phase water. But we capture, or the body specifically ends up and captures what we end up we need, and we have our individual frequencies that you can see here in this little human graphic between the Earth's magnetic fields and then the frequencies that are coming in. We have our own frequency that can then end up and create a customized specific frequency that can end up and reharmonize the cellular energy and the emotional fields back to their bioenergetic balance. Asarumoto, which is up here in the left-hand side, he did a lot of work with intention and sound frequency to the body, or he did the work in regards of water. And when we speak loving thoughts, when we speak kind thoughts, we get these beautiful crystal shapes. But when we speak hatred or harsh tones, we end up when we get these bottom two ununiform looking molecules. But when I was originally looking into this, I was looking at something to help balance my body with the hormones, with the autoimmune, with the emotional side. And that's what ultimately led me down this deep rabbit hole in regards of the frequencies of how we can end up and raise our vibration. And once I learned how to biohack and use this method, I did end up and bring it to the community. I also found outside community as far as the like-minded, amazing people that I now end up and work with and call my network and my colleagues. I have felt a resonance to this. You can see I am sitting on my PMF mat. That is, part of the aspect of frequencies as well, is these EMFs that we end up when we are exposed to. So being able to offset that. And Einstein once said, future of medicine will be the medicine of frequencies. And this ancient technology has resurfaced, and it is making a full comeback. Many people may end up and look at it as woo-woo, but we will end up and get into the aspect of frequencies and the aspect of water, and I definitely speak more about it within the BNC community. Every Wednesday, I do the intuitive steps, and this is part of the steps where we end up when we take this deep dive. But again, the masterclass will also go into this as well in regards of the exclusion zone water and this frequency. So a little bit about water specifically that we drink. We do all end up and deserve to drink pure water, right? It is our birthright. And unfortunately, there is a lot of water in our groundwater specifically that is contaminated with pharmaceuticals, pesticides, chemicals, glyphosate. So it is of utmost importance that I recommend people to get clean water. If you have chemicals in your water, at least getting a good quality filtered water. You can also end up and get at-home filters that help with that water. Now, I personally do all three of these. So there's different methods of solarizing, structuring, and then hydrogen water. Like I said, I do them all. You can see my glass jar sitting out here. Now, it is a clear glass jar. There are benefits in solarizing your water with different colors as well. But for sake of myself, I just use a clear glass jar. Our body is ultimately 70% water. And like I said, when we end up and we solarize the water, when we structure the water, it is a different hydration to the body. And when we speak of the structuring, now this is where Moto's work ends up and comes into this as well, because you can structure it with sound, you can structure it with that frequency. You can also end up, and even the free aspect is once I take my jar from sitting here on my deck rail, I can end up and swirl it around, create an internal vortex within there, and that will end up and help to structure the water. Now you can also end up and hold it close and speak those loving, kind intention into the water. But considering that, 99 out of every 100 molecules in our body are some form of water or this exclusion zone water, the water inside of us is stored next to all the biological surfaces. So all protein surfaces are encapsulated with this exclusion zone water. And so we know that the living matrix of our body, right? We know that every cell has to know what the other cell is doing, and it's all connected, which also ends up and means we are connected throughout this connective tissue, and this tissue is called the fascia. And it's, like I said, it's been referred to in the broader term as the living matrix. But okay, right, why does all this matter? Well, if you've ever dealt with a poor HRV score, which is heart rate variability, stress, poor sleep, tissue stiffness, where you just kind of have, that nagging pain, or chronic injuries maybe, or inflammation, cancer, anxiety, depression, high blood pressure, dry skin, hair, nails, leaky gut symptoms can even end up and be a sign of low exclusion zone water. But all of these symptoms are associated with this lack of exclusion zone water. Now, when we solarize, structure, and then ultimately add the hydration back into this water, there are products out there, right? I always refer to good, better, best. So one of the freest options is, or the easiest, freest option is what I just explained. But you can also end up and get things like an Analemma one. You can get a vortexing machine, such as the Maywu. All of these will end up and create this structured water. But also, like I said, just holding it. Some will say light devices, such as the red light that you end up and you see me sitting in, putting water, and structuring it with that, especially during the winter months when the water can't sit outside due to it freezing. But also over my shoulder, you can end up and see I use a hydrogen water bottle. The hydrogen water provides a therapeutic level of hydrogen into the water. Adding proper water into that hydrogen um, helps to neutralize harmful free radicals, oxidative stress, which ultimately is leading to those previous symptoms, leading to the diseases that we typically have. So, hydrogen water has hundreds of studies out there proving that it helps to regulate heart disease, diabetes, reduce wrinkles, skin issues, and even speed up wound healing, and also good gut health. So, those that deal with leaky gut, even just adding hydrogen water as well as proper nutrition and the proper nutrients helps to create better health and allow the body to absorb that proper food code. So we get code 3 different ways: the magnetic field of the earth, the light that we are in, and also so light, magnetic, and food are the 3 different ways to ultimately improve our gut health. But also, the other way that we are creating drainers and creating stress, fear, and anxiety, I noticed from years of dealing with the diabetes, dealing with the cardiac issues, and etc. Right, being on 7 different medications, that a lot of my illness come from time that I was also spent indoors. I was sedentary. I was watching TV, and the these behaviors contributed to a lot of further health issues. And a lot of that also had to do with what my mind was consuming, right? It was negative aspect. It was harmful frequencies. It was bright lights flashing, and this is also a lot of studies done in regards to overall behaviors, especially in the younger generations. And the voices, the tones, and now they ultimately end up and drive me nuts. So I normally don't end up and have, a TV going, especially during the day, just because of the certain sounds. And you really, when you stop listening to these certain types of music, certain types of shows and programming, you can actually end up and see how it disrupts the nervous system on the times that you do end up and have that influence to them. So really it does influence you subconsciously and the water network within. I have seen it alter several people's behavior, their pattern, the difference in how, if they're playing outside versus being inside and being consumed with electronics. And also, the other aspect when it comes to this is the impact that it has on our circadian rhythm. And oftentimes it is very disrupting because, what do most people do in the morning, right? They wake up and their alarm goes off and they rush out of bed because they're, 10 steps behind at this point of the day. But the other thing that people tend to end up and do is take out their phone and start scrolling first thing. 1, it's a bright light that you're exposed to, but 2, it's that artificial dopamine hit that you are getting by scrolling. And also, maybe that person gets out of bed and they're checking emails and they're, negatively, right, already stressing themselves because there's emails on their phone or there's messages, or they've got things to do, and then they go out and they get coffee and they start turning on all these lights and are in their kitchens under artificial blue light, and finally they may end up and they go outside, right? I get it, you've got ready for work and now you actually make it outside, but what do they end up and they do when they go outside? They put sunglasses on, or they get in their car and they commute to work. Not that going to work is anything bad, but crack your window. I'll get into that in the Circadian Masterclass, is why that can end up and be beneficial. But also the getting outside. Why does circadian matter? Why does the light routine matter? And there are 4 key times of the day that we should technically be seeing in chronological order, even if it's just for a couple minutes, or maybe it's 10, 15 minutes that you can end up and spend out there. But that is sunrise, UVA, UVB. We are moving into the season where Many people are losing their time of being able to make vitamin D in that UVB window, but then also sunset. And so, okay, here's the times of the day, but why is that important? That is important because there are hundreds of studies and articles in regards to circadian rhythm in our body. This is not just something that is being said, being, spoke to in regards of trying to get you away from devices and that type of thing. There are hundreds of studies in regards of circadian regulation and not only our gut health, but our overall health and many of the conditions that we are dealing with, from metabolism to sleep to gut to beyond. So, circadian rhythm, we also need to take that a little bit further into the infradian system, which ultimately means anything beyond just a 24-hour period, which in this case, I am talking about the 4 seasons. So, as you can see, by looking at this, we have the 24-hour around the outside in regards of our body, but also the infradian rhythm on the middle and how we need to look at the 4 seasons, the same way that we need to look at our health as a whole. But like I said, today is just a brief overview of why this is all important. I do end up and break it down even a bit further in the Circadian Masterclass. So make sure the link to the Masterclass is in the description. But ultimately, I will end up and show you in depth how to create vibrant energy and alignment, not only with light, but with the seasons as your guide and the light and the dark to find your joy. So, with that being said, what sets the circadian rhythm, right? Why is she talking about all of this? And you can see that the signal impacts our brain and our hormones. So, the light and the dark cycle send the signal to the SCN, which is the suprachiasmatic nucleus. There are things in our environment that also disrupt this. Remember, that cell phone, first thing in the morning, the artificial lights in the kitchen while you're making your coffee, the fasting that you are maybe putting off until later in the day, creating not getting that food code. But also these disruptions in these signals will deplete that exclusion zone water, that fourth phase of water that is within inside of us. So this is where it all ends up and comes together in harmony and how it all ends up and connects. But let's look a little bit more at the light signals on the body, right? So the light comes into the eye, it ends up and the different times of the day, how it all ends up and interferes. So you can end up and see that the sunrise is predominantly red light. Red light ends up and penetrates deepest, and then it kind of goes into the orange, into the yellow, and ultimately the blue that ends up not penetrating very deep. But you can see based on these how it can end up and get down into that subcutaneous tissue. So the amount of UV light as well as the intensity arriving at Earth is continuously changing. But it also depends on 3 main things: the time of the day, the time of the season, and the latitude. So this is where the infradian comes into the circadian. And where we live on Earth, as far as, if someone is in the south, you have more days of UV light versus someone that is in the northern latitude, such as Canada, that potentially has actually already lost their ability to make vitamin D. That's why ultimately being consistent, working your way and doing it, throughout the summertime, boosting that vitamin D so that you can ward off things like seasonal affect disorder. But from a circadian perspective, this should end up and matter to us because first, our hormones. These routines end up and play a very important role on our hormones, as well as the timing of our meals earlier in the day at sunrise. And yes, even that coffee first thing in the morning needs to end up and be moved. And I take that into a deeper dive of where I talk about food on a local and seasonal aspect, but also the timing of your meal earlier to the day, what to consume, when to consume, etc. So looking a little bit more at the chronological order and why this ends up in matters, there is a specific barcode or a blend of colors, if you will. As you can see by this, the sun starts to rise at the beginning of the day, the light is scattered, and there is not much of that blue light present, and slowly it starts to appear as we get towards the center bright white line, which is what we end up when we call solar noon. So the more that the blue light starts to appear, the more that we start to feel awake, we start to feel energized. Basically, if you put this into car perspective for the men that are watching, as we end up when we, go to start a car on a cold winter day, you don't just go out and start the car and, go and drive at 65 mph down the highway, right? You go out, you let it warm up, you let the motor warm up, get the oil flowing, right? And then end up and drive it down the road, defrost the window, whatever you may end up and need to do. Basically, we need to allow our bodies to end up and do the same thing, but without doing it in this shocking our nervous system way of, bailing out of bed when the alarm goes off and being 10 steps behind. That ends up and sets your hormones into a frenzy, just the way it would set your car into, issues and have to have, the motor looked at and potentially several other things. But this, like I said, the line in the middle is the solar noon. After that, as that's when the sun is at its highest point, and then as it starts to end up and go down in the west, you will see those colors or light frequency that is present starts to end up and fade back down into predominantly red light frequency. If anyone ever remembers, in school, I learned it Roy G. Biv. That's how we memorize the rainbow, right? The red, the orange, the yellow, the green, the blue, the indigo, and then the violet. And then it starts to end up and go back down through from the blue, the indigo, violet, yellow, orange, and red. And so as we end up, when we go through these days, remember when I talked about that cell phone first thing in the morning? That light frequency that we are getting from that cell phone is essentially the same as solar noon. So that is why it ends up and it shocks our body, because it is sending a signal to our body through our eyes, through that suprachiasmatic nucleus, that it is essentially noon. And we completely missed all of, sunrise and UVA frequencies. And so now the body is trying to make the hormones to catch up to the light signal that it is receiving. And we also end up and have melanopsin receptors in the skin, in the fat cells, that tell us, whether there is more blue light or whether there is less blue light that is naturally present. That's why I say we need to get the skin in the game, because we also end up and have thermoreceptors as well. So our body can end up and tell the timing of the day by the eyes and the melanopsin receptors in the eyes, but also the skin. We have the ability, like I said, to make vitamin D, but we can also end up and get it through the infradian system, recognizing our days are starting to get colder. Just like nature intends with the animals of how they end up and they build up their coat to stand the wintertime, right? They don't just hibernate and become modern, civilized animals. They end up and they build this coat. They build up this tolerance as the days are changing. So as this is all changing, as the, infrared or the nights become longer and the days become shorter, we do end up and need the ability to produce more and get that red light so that we produce more melatonin, because we are supposed to be calmer. It's supposed to be a healing aspect or a healing season. And any damage that we have created, it allows for a chance to end up and start to repair. And as that natural infrared light produces more of that pineal melatonin, because as we end up when we see the sunrise and our eyes are sending that signal, it actually tells the pineal gland to start banking that melatonin. And so then our mitochondria end up and use that to end up and run autophagy and apoptosis. And also using things like the blue blockers that, Sherry was talking about when we first started tonight, or sitting in red light, candles, any of those type of things. But after sunset, minimizing the amount of blue light so that our body still gets that signal that the day is winding down. Yes, I am on a device. I am on my computer, but I have technology on my computer that has turned my screen red. You can also end up and do it on your cell phone. That doesn't give you permission to end up and be, on your cell phone all the time when you end up in the evening or first thing in the morning. But I get there are some scenarios. And like I said, I go way more depth into that as far as the exposure and not disrupting the circadian rhythm with devices. But also the other aspect is the time of the season. So when I speak to the UVB light, that makes a difference whether we're in June or whether we're in December, right? Especially for someone like me in Nebraska. That's going to end up and make a difference because I do ultimately lose that in the wintertime. And when we are in the summertime, the light rays that travel, so the sunlight travels higher in the sky, and the sunlight that hits the earth is at a higher angle, but it's in a smaller area. So it increases that light intensity and that UV index, where it maybe is like, an 8 or a 9 in the summertime, but then in December, which ultimately even like right now, so we're still in October, right? And my UV index is already down to 4. So that the rays of light are scattered out, and the sunlight is traveling lower in the sky, and as it hits the earth at a lower angle, it decreases that light intensity. So like I said, when we start to lose this, we really need to maximize it during the right season. But we do have things that I teach and speak to in the masterclass as ways to help with this. But again, the third point is the latitude. So those that are closer to the equator are getting that most direct sunlight. Even people in, the southern states may only lose their UV light for a few days. Some don't lose it at all. But ultimately, those of us that are further north, that's light is having to travel further. We do unfortunately end up and lose it. But really getting and maximizing it in chronological order so that we are getting it at the stronger time. This is also makes a difference in those people that we call, snow bunnies that end up and travel further south to escape the winters, right? They end up and they go south. But this also can create a misalignment, if you will, as far as the body, depending how long you're staying. But making sure that your photoreceptors are getting the right signal and that the communication isn't weak or vague. So by now you should be able to start seeing how the intensity of sunlight, as well as the amount of UVA, UVB arriving at the skin or in the eyes, is extremely important. But again, I urge you, if you have more questions or want to learn more, to definitely take the masterclass, because I do end up and dive deeper. But ultimately, it is extremely important for the markers of the body to understand the season that we are in on Earth, and whether we are in Mexico or whether we are up in Canada. So it also makes a difference what time of day, sunrise, or whether it's noon, but also the timing of the season, summertime, wintertime, and the decrease of the UV light and it registering on those photoreceptors, and getting to know and being ready, preparing for the winter programming. And I do, in that masterclass, have definitely ways of boosting the body for that winter programming and how to end up and create a more resilient you for those colder temperatures that are starting to come upon us, as well as the lack of sunlight, and to help you perfectly adapt into your winter time so that maybe you're not quite like me going out and, being in a tank top in the snow, but at least being able to offer you information that helps you to live harmoniously and adapt to your environment season to season in order to help receive nature's proper language as far as its intentions and not disrupt the hormones. But I know I have spoke a lot in regards of hormones. Now, why does this all matter on a circadian? What are the wavelengths that we also get from sunlight? So you can see on the left hand side here the difference in the summer and the winter. In the wintertime, in the bottom one, 10 minutes prior to sunrise, there are a higher lux of light, but also the red is more intense. And remember, the red light helps us to store that melatonin, right? That's going to end up and help with autophagy later in the evening. Versus in the summertime when our days are longer and the nights aren't quite, the days are longer and the nights are shorter versus winter when the days are shorter and nights are longer. We need more of that. So the way that the sun ends up and is continuously changing benefits our body. But also as that sun starts to come towards solar noon, it starts to gain in that blue intensity, right? We start to shift this wave, if you will, more into that blue wavelength. And these are the difference and why I speak about artificial lighting. So these are the different sharp peaks in the various lighting that we typically have in our modern homes. Now, in my opinion, there are 4 key circadian hormones that are regulated by alignment with the rhythm. That's leptin, insulin, cortisol, and melatonin. So when we end up and are exposed to these sharp peaks, when we are exposed to anything except for, G, H, and I, which those are, you can see more of a balance. They don't create these sharp peaks. That is natural light. That is, midday sunlight, sunrise, sunset, where B, C, D, E, and F, A is incandescent. If someone can't switch completely to red light, then that is what I would typically recommend is a good quality incandescent bulb. But getting rid of all of these other aspects as far as lighting in our home just because of the signal that it sends. But again, why are the hormones important, right? And many of you may have heard of leptin. Many of you may have not. Leptin is the master circadian hormone. So the role leptin plays in the body, leptin comes from our fat cells and makes its way up to the brain to tell the brain that you're essentially no longer hungry. It also ends up and controls the ghrelin. So when ghrelin is up, leptin is down. But if we're getting this proper signal of the leptin into the hypothalamus, then it tells us that we can stop eating and we're no longer hungry. But when we end up when we have leptin resistance and we don't get that message, we're feeling hungry. We also feel hungry at inappropriate times. We're not feeling satiated with our meals. When leptin is very active and it's doing its job and it's telling our brain how many of these electrons, again, our bodies run on electrons. So even the electrons that we get from the earth in grounding, we end up when we get electrons from our fat cells too. It all ends up and goes through the electron transport chain. But this also helps to regulate the appetite. So if you are insulin resistant, if you are leptin resistant well before. So leptin resistant happens, you're not getting this proper signal, which then ultimately leads to insulin resistance. So leptin has to dock every night. This is why that quality sleep ends up and matters, not just the quantity. So I'm not talking about, laying in bed and sleeping for 9 hours, but I'm talking about what type of quality, what is your heart rate doing? What is your HRV doing? What is, all of this doing? And is your body able to get that inventory of how much body fat it has? Eating after sunset, again, timing of the meals, timing of this nutrition ends up and matters because eating after sunset or eating too close to bed prevents this leptin from docking at the hypothalamus. Eating carbs out of season, overeating, again, disrupts this proper circadian signaling. So Also people that overfast, or maybe you're on the opposite side and you undereat too much. This is destroying that leptin signal as well. Yo-yo dieting for years, right? We've all been there. I spoke the other night in an interview of how many different, options I did over the years of shakes and pills and potions and Weight Watchers. And, we've all, many of us at least, let me rephrase that, have done this over the years. And in the short amount of time that we have, did these, because typically those were all, some form of a fad diet, right? This will end up and lead to leptin resistance. So as I mentioned, it's a circadian hormone, right? The circadian rhythm will end up and control your sensitivity to this. So we want to end up and shift our eating to sunrise. We want to eat within, a half hour of being awake. This is when our body is best able to assimilate those nutrients, digest that food. There's also a study that was done out of the University of Birmingham by Courtney Peterson that looked at early time restricted eating as well. But to reverse leptin resistance, we must lower that hypothalamic inflammation. So essentially the brain inflammation, right? Lowering the cortisol, lowering the insulin, eating adequate protein, even fat can end up and, provide benefit here. Also fat fasting for many will provide a benefit here to help get that circadian rhythm back in line and to help also with the hormones. So further influence on the body as far as the cortisol and the melatonin, they are on an axis of each other. So when one is high, when we are stressed, again, remember those 6 intuitive steps. Managing the stress is one of those. So as we end up and we manage the stress, we lower the cortisol, which allows for proper melatonin at night. Many people will feel wired but tired. They're stimulating the cortisol in the evening. They're not allowing this normal rhythm of melatonin. Ultimately, you want your melatonin to start creating as soon as the sun sets. It starts to create, it peaks in the body about 2, 3 a.m. It starts to drop off so that the cortisol can start to come up. Everyone looks at cortisol as the villain as far as, it peaking too high. Cortisol is not the villain. We end up and need it to help wake us up, but ultimately many people are peaking it way too high. That's where you're getting the dawn effect or the dawn phenomenon. But also down here in the bottom right hand corner, you will end up and see the hormonal cascade. This is dependent on the circadian cycle based on cholesterol as the backbone to make your hormones. So when we look at this, as far as the vitamin D aspect, as far as the sex hormones for men as well, testosterone is on here, estradiol is on here. So also making sure that we get the seafood so that we get the DHA. All of this ends up and makes a difference on the influence of the body. So the metabolic benefit of proper circadian rhythm, sunrise, UVA hormone production, including the pregnenolone, making and allowing this to all naturally regulate our appetite and create those beta endorphins. UV also is the signal that puts the brakes on the cortisol at, and all our other steroid hormones. So we don't make too much cortisol, which can elevate the hunger levels as well. Sunlight energizes those electrons when we get skin in the game. It also creates more of that exclusion zone water and actually expands it fourfold, which creates a higher energy potential and allows us to absorb and metabolize our food more efficiently. UV striking that exclusion zone gives off an appetite suppressing effect, which allows us to be more regulated with our appetite and all of these other points considered. Circadian health in light environments are underutilized and ignored by many when it ends up and it comes to leptin and weight loss. We must practice these habits daily. Like I said, consistency is key. but also not letting perfection be the hindrance of your getting started. Yes, we do need proper nutrition as well, but doing this and utilizing things like even red light therapy, which I will get to more here in a minute, appropriately is key, and they can also end up and be helpful in the weight loss in conjunction with these factors, reducing the inflammation and losing that excess weight as the body ends up and becomes comfortable, safe with us, and safe in our environment. Therefore, we should also consider our environment in addition to just the nutrition. And usually I tell my clients that their appetite will end up and regulate naturally after a couple weeks, but also using fat or using carbs as a lever for fat loss, strategic ketosis, also the strategic fasting. So doing things like the fat fast, which I do have a masterclass on my website as well. But ultimately, making sure that we don't end up in a low leptin situation, continuing to optimize those sleep. And as for the frequency of the red light, it is hugely beneficial when it comes to us as far as using a low level wavelength of light that helps on many conditions. It helps to stimulate stem cells, increase collagen production, treat fine lines, reduce wrinkles, scars. It treats wounds, eczema, as well as thyroid health. I utilize the red light with my autoimmune. I would end up and use it in the morning. I would eat my first meal with red light shining at my throat. It does help also with joint and muscle pain. I could go on and on about this red light. I do have a link for EMR Tech as well as the higher dose face mask. I love when I end up and I show this. People think that I'm some, medieval type person, but red light therapy is able to benefit our cells, produce this biochemical effect that strengthen the mitochondria. And as we all know, the mitochondria is the powerhouse, as well as this exclusion zone water, which I go more into in the Circadian Masterclass. And it's energy that it provides us, but where the cell's energy is created by increasing the function of this powerhouse, utilizing red light therapy to our benefit to create more ATP energy. Our cells rejuvenate themselves, they function more efficiently, repair the damage, and the red light has helped on many different occasions in helping people, especially in the wintertime, when it gets too cold to where they can go outside and maybe schedules get busy. But like I said, I incorporate it into my routine also when I injured my knee. So for something like acute pain, muscle repair, it can end up and ultimately be beneficial on that aspect as well. So again, action steps that end up and help you to benefit and not corrupt this language that we are getting, but the actions that block you from receiving. So let's reflect on some of them. And when you get up in the morning, make time for seeing sunrise. Limit your modern lighting, or junk lighting, as I like to call it, in your environment. So don't turn on those artificial lights. Maybe end up and have a salt lamp instead, or a red light, or even candlelight for that matter. But yes, the light that you are, probably sitting in right now, watching me end up and teach you this. And then also going outside, getting connected to the ground, doing some grounding, drinking some structured mineral water. So making sure that, you add the minerals to it. Again, I go into the minerals that I use, eating earlier in the day. So maybe you end up and just shift it for a couple weeks, right? Most of you are familiar with fasting throughout the day. I would like to challenge you to shift those even just for the next couple weeks, and eating more with sunrise right now. Take a break also from social media, do a social media detox, if you will. But essentially, if you can avoid it at least first thing in the morning, that's going to end up and be beneficial. And then also taking light breaks throughout the day. Many of you may work from home, so just even cracking open a window if you can, or if you're in the vehicle traveling to work, crack your window down, open your sunroof. do not wear your sunglasses outside. You want to expose that naked eye, if you will. And finally, when you end up and arrive at the office and spend that whole day in front of the screens or other devices, making sure that you are also doing, some form of the grounding to help recharge your body, and actions of being more consistent day in, day out of our lives, so that we are not blocking or disrupting this nature's language, if you will. So awesome. Hopefully that was a good overview for you. Being able to look at light in a whole different way, as far as what we're consuming. But I was not able to see any of the comments. So
We've got some questions. We definitely have some questions. So somebody asked, when you said about the coffee, is that true for decaf coffee as well?
So decaf coffee, that's kind of a double question right there. Many of your decaf whey are chemically made, and so yes, they still can end up and still contain caffeine to them. So ultimately, I would end up, even at decaf, I would put it after a meal, or at least 90 minutes after being up. And if you're eating at sunrise, then putting that 90 minutes after the food, or being up, would be beneficial.
We have a question. Do you have info on a bad diet and this is still leading to healing?
So that's where, do you have info on a bad diet and this is still leading to healing? So that's where I would end up and look at the person as an individual. I obviously know the person that ended up and commented that, because everyone has an individual lifestyle, right? Everyone ends up and has certain foods. I'm not saying that everyone has to do carnivore or keto or paleo. Everyone has an individual aspect of what they can end up and consume. So being able to speak with a person, one-on-one, so that we can really end up and hone in on what a quote bad diet is. But I do go into how to be able to identify or look at what is appropriate for you, as far as possibly needing to cut out a few foods so that you can reintroduce and see if that food is inflammatory for you.
Great. Somebody said if it's everyday dose too.
Everyday dose still has caffeine in it. It still has coffee in it. So even though it is a mushroom latte, I am not going to end up and tell you that you can end up and have everyday dose first thing in the morning. But yes, as far as the everyday dose, I would still end up and put it after a meal.
Definitely. Somebody asked, can I ground on cement?
Concrete is an actual conductive surface, as long as it is unsealed. So as long as it doesn't have any type of a sealant on it, it is, say, a standard sidewalk, right? Will provide benefit, but again, it's one of those good, better, best. So the conductivity of the concrete is going to end up and potentially be a little bit less than if you were standing with your feet on the ground in the grass.
Somebody asked, do I look at the sunrise directly?
No, you end up and you look at the horizon. So as much as the sun can actually help, or circadian rhythm can help with eye conditions, you don't want to end up and stare at it direct. So check out your horizon. Granted, as the sun is low to the horizon, it is predominantly red light. It is going to be less intense. So if you have sensitive eyes, going out first thing in the morning, because many people, that's why they end up and they wear sunglasses as well, is the light intensity is just too bright for their eyes. But if you can get out there when that sun is lower to the horizon, it is ultimately going to help the eyes to heal. And there are times, let me end up and put this in here. There are times where I would recommend wearing sunglasses. And again, I go into that in the masterclass, when the only time that, I would recommend someone wearing sunglasses.
Great information.
So,
We had one last one. I work on a screen all day. What can I do?
so there are, and I'll put a link in the description after we get done. But there is a software. If it is your own computer, there's software that you can download onto your computer. It's called Iris. If it is not your computer, say it's a work computer and they don't allow, additional things to be downloaded, there are actual screens that you can get, red covers that you can end up and get to go over your screens to help. There's actually yellow, orange, and red that you can end up and put on your screens. There's also apps that you can put on cell phones too to help with that. I'm getting to the benefit of this as a standalone for healing. I want to say it's standalone. I think it's a very pivotal point in the puzzle. It's not the only thing, but it is definitely a strong piece of the puzzle that if you can end up and optimize the aspects of circadian rhythm and be able to utilize them. That's why in my 6 intuitive steps, out of the steps, the light routine is the first. And then it kind of goes into the stress, and then it goes into, the grounding, and then it goes into nutrition and sleep. Because like I said, they are all pieces of the puzzle. So
Absolutely. Well, Becky, it's always, like I said, I pick little things up, and I've heard this presentation a couple times already, and I still learn something each time. So, the master class is going to be November 11th at 10 a.m.
Yep.
Central.
Yep.
And you kind of get some deals with that. So you can, if you sign up, you will get the 2-hour masterclass. You also get 1 month membership to the BNC community, so you can see what other things, meetings that we have to offer. And you get 4 follow-up question and answer sessions. And then Becky will have giveaways as well. So excited.
Yes, absolutely. And it will definitely take a more deep dive than just this quick overview, even though we did push our hour tonight. As one of the community members says, I never end up and present anything quick, right? It's definitely well in depth as far as the information that I provide. And so
yeah. And this is part of the reason why you see Becky and I wearing blue blocker glasses. I don't know if people can tell, but I have a red tent because I have a red light right behind my laptop. I have a work laptop that's not mine, so I can't put the software on. So that's why I would use these glasses. And then I also ground. And this is like a funny looking contraption, but these are the kind of things that Becky's going to go in depth during the master class. So do sign up for that. Becky, thank you so much for enlightening everyone, and hopefully everyone will start to start to think, more about what can we do. I know my sleep has improved tenfold. And, you know, I remember when I got started on 2 years ago down this health healing journey, and I would hear, "Oh, sleep's important," and I would always think, how do you what? Like, I don't sleep. I'm up half the night. And I am that very rarely happens anymore. And so great information. I learn all the time. Thank you so very much.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure to end up and bring this not only to our BNC community every week in the intuitive steps, usually some form, some fashion, we end up and we talk about the different aspects of, red light or circadian rhythm or, something along those lines, but also being able to put it together and teach it in a masterclass format. For others and being able to ultimately bring it to our channel and have it on and on our podcast. So
All right.